How you doing, my friends? It's Covey, and you just entered the crazy-ass Newfie News. I have a new news article I would like to share with you. For those of you who think that banking and the private banking industry and the fact that there may be people empowering themselves over your own countries and tipping your own political powers of people and persuading laws that are not constructive for the people and instead helps corporations and whatnot. Some of you who have heard of private banking industries and now know that we don't, and none of the countries create their own money, that they actually borrow it from this private banking industries on a compounded interest. Your own money is created when you take out loans. Well, in the last few years, since the world had such difficulty financially that we hit a wall and whatnot and was affected hugely across the world, Iceland was one of them as well. I remember reading where they were looking at approximately 80,000 plus per citizen to pay off this debt. They would literally become slaves that they didn't even know how, or even they couldn't believe in living in such an existence like that. So instead they decided to do something more radical than any of the others of the countries had even the balls to try to do. They went after the bankers. They even tried to put their own political members into jail and have them charged. And they refused to pay this enormous, ridiculous, obvious theft, criminal act of the banks. Refused to do any kind of bailout nonsense. So, they were told, like everybody, they were going to collapse. The euro was no longer. I even remember reading that my own country, Canada, they came to Canada asking if they could join and use Canadian dollar as their finances. Canada, whoever it was, Stephen Harper's group, said no. And here they are 4 years later. Watch this wonderful video how they've already increased in their production and living a better life. Take that fear away from a lot of you. It is possible to go on without the private bank's ridiculous industry. Please take the time to watch this awesome news report. Check it out, my friends. Here you go. Enjoy.
Iceland stuns in so many ways. Its geysers, glaciers and thermal springs reward even the pickiest tourist. But beyond the beautiful World Heritage sites, Iceland is a bleak place for any humanity to survive. Winters are cold and daylight is a precious commodity. In summer, 13 degrees is a warm day. Which means that Icelandic people have had to develop a unique tenacity, resilience and propensity for hard work, which they've had to draw upon to survive this recent, very man-made crisis. I wanted to know whether those characteristics that helped create the economic bubble might now lift the economy. President Grimson has been in office for 16 years and has seen boom and bust.
We have a very strong sense of history and of our culture. But mingled with that sense of solidarity and deep roots and history is also an entrepreneurial sense that perhaps led us astray in the years before the crash, but has also enabled a nation of farmers and fishermen to transform itself from being, up to the 1960s or the 1970s, among the poorest countries in Europe, to having achieved now one of the highest standards of living that you can find in the world, despite the difficulties that follow the crash. Fundamentally, we are still a nation of farmers and fishermen.
But fishermen turned into financiers between 2001 and 2008, and the economy grew by 230%, as banks loaned money to anyone and everyone who wanted it, until the global money markets froze, destroying the Icelandic economy over a summer and creating the country's first ever civil unrest.
We stand together and we demand the government to do a better job.
When the then Prime Minister addressed a shocked nation in October 2008, he invoked the help of a higher deity.
munum við standa storminn af okkur. Guð blessi Ísland. It really makes me feel angry and sad because, the country is made of people. The nation is made of people. And societies are made by people for people. But now it seems like, banks are running societies, and that is horribly wrong.
Theodor Magnusson works in IT, and he also hunts reindeer for a living. He, like most Icelandic borrowers, took out a mortgage 12.5 years ago, which tied the principal to inflation. The collapse of the currency and the ensuing spike in inflation has meant he now owes 1.5 times the original mortgage.
I've been paying, every month for 150 months of this loan. And I owe much more than I borrowed. I borrowed 6 million kroner. I owe 9.7 million. And I've been paying around 5 million in these 150 months.
As is often the case in politics, the party which inherits the mess doesn't always get much credit for cleaning it up. Iceland's ruling coalition, in power since 2009, has, though, turned things around. The deficit is down from 14% of GDP to around 1% today. Unemployment has halved and exports are up. But this has been achieved in part by almost 100 new taxes, including a tax on sugary drinks.
We have closed this dramatic gap in the budget, which has been very important for our economy. And so I think that we have made difficult decisions, but I think some were good, some were not as good. But overall, I think that we are well on the way in becoming a very strong economy again.
What the government and Icelanders in general won't do is compromise on the welfare state. Education and healthcare are free for all, and many who lost their jobs simply got another degree to make themselves more employable. There's also no glass ceiling in this country. Participation rates by women are amongst the highest in the world. From the Prime Minister to the Finance Minister and to business leaders at all levels, women are vital to this economy.
People always say that if you can see Asian from an apartment in Iceland, the price is probably 1 million kroner higher than in other apartments.
It looks like the Table Mountain of Reykjavik.
Yeah.
Ásdís Bragadóttir used to be the mayor of one of Reykjavik's wealthiest suburbs. Now she runs a privately owned care home service, and her biggest customers are local authorities.
When you start a new business and the economy just like overnight collapses, it's like, wow, can we really survive? But at the same time, I always had in mind a sentence from one of my professors. When I was doing my MBA studies, one of the professors said, and then when you go out there to run companies, please keep in mind, it's not like an exciting movie, it's more like a soap opera. You do the same things over and over and over and over again. And with that in mind, like we are doing a soap opera.
When the crisis struck in the autumn of 2008, Iceland's economy entered an apparent death spiral, plunging for 10 straight quarters. But by letting its currency collapse and its bloated banks simply die, things turned around rapidly. So since 2011, Iceland has seen 7 straight quarters of growth, averaging at around 2.5% per annum. But the macroeconomic picture hides the reality for many ordinary Icelandic people. Thousands have had to emigrate in search of work, and that has artificially kept the unemployment rate down. And for those people who have stayed, many of them have taken on second or third jobs in order to maintain living standards, which are still amongst the highest in the world. So the question is, how long can Iceland maintain this seeming facade? Neil McMahon has been living here 38 years. He's a full-time teacher, but he's also a translator and tour guide. He and his daughter met me in a restaurant in the reinvigorated marina area of Reykjavik.
I think for an outsider, maybe just reading articles in the newspaper or following a brief TV coverage of Iceland, they might be fooled into believing that Icelanders have managed to extricate themselves very effectively from this crisis. However, there are still a lot of problems. People have lost their homes, and particularly perhaps the younger generation, people who had huge mortgages and are now having to try and deal with this situation. I work as a teacher, and after 35 years in the profession as a secondary teacher, I come out with £24,000 annually. So it would be rather difficult to make ends meet on that.
Icelanders know that many countries, including Britain, are watching their nascent economic recovery very closely. Certainly when this crisis broke, Reykjavik didn't abide by the usual rules. Apart from letting the bloated banks collapse, Iceland also imposed strict capital controls. Even today, companies and individuals need permission to take money out of the country. So what can the UK, with its still dominant banking sector, learn from Iceland's experience?
Don't depend on a phony economy. It was not real, and we understand that now. All in Iceland, if we look back, we see very clearly that this was not real. This was complete bubble, and the financial business is very necessary. Don't get me wrong, but it's very dangerous business because it sucks the best, and it's not real.
Jan Sigurdsson's business is very real. Osur makes the bionic legs, which the so-called Blade Runner Oscar Pistorius has made so famous. They help many people, including soldiers who've lost limbs in Afghanistan, to abandon their wheelchairs and vastly improve their quality of life. Osur struggled to find engineers during the reign of the banks because they couldn't match the salaries, but not anymore. Like so many Icelandic firms since the crash, engineers work in engineering. Of course, they are the lucky ones. Well-paid specialists rarely have their homes repossessed. But it's a reality facing thousands of Icelanders tethered to mortgages which never get paid off. It's creating an intergenerational conflict as grandparents have to pass their debts on.
What is so serious is that those who had their houses with no debts, like elderly people, they gave mortgage to their children or grandchildren. It's like they're eating up our homes.
It's very important for us to now just take the status on where are we and where do we want to go? What kind of society do we want into the longer future? That's the big questions we should be asking at the moment. And one part of these questions is whether we should be a member of the European Union, whether we should be a member of the Eurozone. And I have answered this question for me personally, and my answer is yes. Overall, I think that we are just typical islanders with hopes and dreams. You could also say that maybe we have been a little bit arrogant in the past. Hopefully we are evolving into a more humble nation after what we have been through.
Wow, amazing, eh? To see Iceland moving forward in the way that they're doing so. Iceland, one of the highest standard of living of countries in the world, despite the financial difficulties that there was assailed upon them. What does that say? A country that continued to make their education and welfare of health free. Of the highest in any country of the world, women participate in this country, in their politics, in all aspects equal to men, and are seen as that. He says, don't depend on the foreign economy. I believe it should be, we should make sure that we print our own money and not some private foreign banking institutes. Loans are created by your own bank of the country you exist and reside in, not private banks. This is why it is caused. This is the difficulty, this is the problem. Anyway, this is Covey, 1969. God bless each and every one of you, and all those your heart touches.